So the first heter in Hilchos Yichud I want to go through is the heter of Baila Be'ir. Famous idea. Now obviously this only works for a married woman. For a single girl going to the doctor or a single girl going to the therapist, unmarried woman, this does not apply. So you're already limited how far this heter can go. There's a heter of Baila Be'ir. Normally, Baila Be'ir is there's a certain fear that the woman has. You know, her husband's watching over her. Her husband obviously doesn't want anything improper to go on between her and somebody else.
She's going to get
And there's a fear that the husband will come, the husband will see what's going on,
pull out his gun.
and
Yeah.
it's dangerous for her. Or Lamaisa, right, or the other person.
Very dangerous.
Lamaisa, Moshe already talked about a shayla, which is very relevant. You know, in the world, a husband could be working, you know, especially in New York City. Husband's working, he might only be 5 miles away, but Freeman's watching.
Traffic.
Traffic, New York City. You can't just run in and be there on the spur of a moment. You're stuck. So Moshe already dealt with the shayla. What do you say? Is there a din Baila Be'ir where you know the husband's not going to come? The husband's far away. He can't reach there so quickly. So it's not so pashut. In such a case, you would have a heter. But let's say the husband, there is some access, some availability of the husband coming, which would therefore potentially have an issue of Baila Be'ir. So I saw discussing doctors, I saw Rav Scheinberg have some psakim of his in Hilchos Yichud. So Rav Scheinberg goes with, I believe it's a Chachmas Adam, that says there's no such din of Baila Be'ir. First of all, it's not possible to din Baila Be'ir outside the woman's home. Classic case of Baila Be'ir, the woman, where is the woman? Of course she's at home. Baila Be'ir is the husband coming home. Not so simple. Baila Be'ir for the husband to find her in a cafe with a guy, in some other spot outside of the home. In general, classic heter Baila Be'ir is where the woman is miyachid in her home with a man, but the husband could come. The woman sells something from her home, right? Very common. People don't want to pay, rental fees and storefronts nowadays in different spots in the country, right? You might have mask mandates, so they're selling things from their house. Potentially, that could be legal issues. So, okay, a husband coming home to his house, that gives you a heter Baila Be'ir. But let's say the woman has a shop, not by her home. That may not be Baila Be'ir because it's not coming to the house. Okay, but besides that, Rav Scheinberg argues that Baila Be'ir, if the husband sent her to the doctor, knows that she's going to the doctor, all that itself already is in the heter Baila Be'ir. When he put her in the situation, allowed for her to be in the situation to begin with, that may not be such a heter. So that's one thing. Additionally, we'll get to another aspect which therapists might have that might totally negate also Baila Be'ir. There's another heter which we talk about Rav Moshe utilizing. In general, a heter for doctors. Why is a doctor able to service a patient in general, to be involved in this whole process, touching them, potentially yichud with them? So there's really two chazakas, Chazal said. One is Tari b'malachto. He's busy with his job. He's not here, it's not a social engagement. He's here to do a job. So he's focused on his job. He's a doctor. He's performing his job. So the assumption is, since he's a doctor, he's doing his job, he's going to do a good job. And he's not going to be focused on abusing this person, taking advantage of this person. That's A. B, the second step, even beyond that, is a concept that Eno Makalkal Naso. He's not going to mess up his profession. If somebody would be accused of abuse, especially a doctor or a therapist, no one's going to trust them. No one's going to go to them. He'll lose his parnasa.
Lose his license.
Lose his license.
Yeah.
So with that on the line, that's seemingly a very strong chazaka. You're not going to do something wrong. A general person, no big deal. He's alone. He came to a store to buy something. The woman has a store. There's no one in the store. Just a male and her. Okay. He doesn't have a job. This is not his job. This is not his profession. So that's a very dangerous situation with Yichud. But where we're talking about a professional, we're talking about a doctor. So A, he's busy doing his job, and B, he doesn't want to lose his job. As I said, these situations, unfortunately, where you had therapists taking advantage, they lost everything. All their jobs, all their columns, their books, they're all banned. So that's seemingly a strong deterrent. Yes?
Are all
Yeah,
these
I think
situations
so.
that you're giving these examples, are they all concerning that the man and the woman are in such a situation where they're genuinely private and there's no reasonable chance that someone else can come in?
could be a man and a
If I'm at a gas station and I go into their kiosk and say, hey, the door is open.
50 years today.
At nighttime, and there's a woman in there, somebody else can still come in,
Right. That's different. We also have to talk about, what exactly the sheer of Yichud is. Just walking in and out, it's not a big deal necessarily. But that's one of the elevator debates. Right? You get an elevator, it's that, okay. But yes,
What about the obvious reason that it's to help a person's health? So wouldn't that be a reason the doctor could examine her and put people here alone?
yeah, 100%. You go to a doctor because the Shemar National Sefer. You need to go to doctors. The person shouldn't hold back from going to a doctor because of potential Yichud issues. We'll talk about later. Ideally, I say that with a caveat. Ideally, we'll talk about maybe in choosing a doctor. It's best for a man to choose a male doctor and a woman to choose a female doctor. But if that's not available, especially when you're weighing, let's say the best person for my situation is of the opposite gender. So the Pashut shot, then you have to choose what's best for your health. But these halachas of Yichud have to be factored in. How are you going to deal with it? So this concept of Tarid B'M Naso, he's busy with his job, and he doesn't want to lose his job. In general, right, strong chazaka. Just yesterday, I had discussed of spending time with the posek. So I asked him, what do we say in these chazakas in the world today? Yeah, people don't want to lose their job. People are, professionals. In the secular world, every other day, is there a story of some professional taking advantage of his situation?
All the time.
I don't mean professional actors.
24/7.
I mean professionals.
24/7.
People in positions. They went to school for years in medical school and this. And what they do, they abuse their position.
All day.
They abuse the trust of the people coming to them. So Tarid B'M Naso, come on. They're thinking of it. They're multitasking. They're doing their job. They're thinking about this person too.
Is it really happening, or is it happening?
So there are many cases, again, I don't want to get into the broader topic of abuse. Yes, of course, within abuse cases, there are cases which are false accusations. But at the same time, we do know these things are
It does
happening.
happen. It does
It
happen.
definitely does happen. And the rate of these things happening and being exposed is definitely something, the society itself is a society. People are inundated with these things. And there really are issues. And also the idea of a person losing it all. From a Musar standpoint, when you see a case like, wow, look at this person. He lost everything that he had, right? Is it not every other week you hear a scandal? This politician built up his career for
Cuomo.
years and years and
Cuomo.
years. And then, right, aspirations to be president. And he loses it because he takes advantage of a person, he abuses a person.
Arrogant.
So the idea of a person never do this risking it all. They do it, they think they'll get away with it, they think it won't happen to them. Every other month, every other week, you find someone else getting busted for these things. He's stupid, it wouldn't happen to me.
Also, if you're a Democrat, you have first.
Right? Certain people can cover up better. So what's shot? Do we still say there's a chazaka, even in the world today, in 2021, where unfortunately it's not just the secular world, the firm world too, people who had top positions, top askanim, people helping seemingly Yidden, that were washed away with these scandals. So the Posek said he assumes the answer is yes. Today, when Chazal make a chazaka, the chazaka is a chazaka, the kanon rabba. Chazal said it's chazaka, normally this is the norm. Are there people that will violate it? Yeah. The Rav said to me, he says, Bayim Be'ir, Pesach Pesul Kushas Rabim, these Heterim that Chazal have in Hilchos Yichud. Are there cases despite Bayim Be'ir and despite Pesach Pesul Kushas Rabim, things go on? Yes. Within all these Heterim, no one's saying these are impenetrable fortresses that Chazal say, if you do this, nothing will happen. No. But Chazal are saying, if you have this situation, it's something to rely on halachically, and like we said before, and therefore, you know, when there's a tzarech, you need to go to the doctor, you can utilize it. It's a balance. Chazal were balancing, people have to live life, but at the same time, we have to worry about these situations. So this chazaka is something. It's a halachic force. Is it God going to stop every situation? No. And we see this, and we see it. But it's still a chazaka. That's the power of a chazaka from Chazal. Now, practically, I did see Olbaum. Olbaum is a beautiful sefer. So he talks about some of these halachas in Yichud. So I saw him paskin. He wasn't ready l'chachila to monitor a situation of a doctor, and you've seen this true of Moshe, just because of Targum Nasa. Just because he's not going to be mekaltal his profession. In the evidence, if that's the only thing you have, okay, you're really stuck. You really need to go to dafka this doctor. Okay, you can rely on these heterim. But ideally, Poles can say it's better to have another level of shmira. What would the other level of shmira be? This is what we talked about before. Pesach Pesuach Rosh Hashanah. The basic idea of Pesach Pesuach is to have a door open. And a door open doesn't necessarily mean you keep your front door actually open. Look, if you do that, not talking about it. But it means the door is unlocked and people have access to come in. Usually, what we tell people is to really utilize Pesach Pesuach Rosh Hashanah. You have to tell people you can stop by anytime. Right? A cola guy, you go home during lunch, and there's a babysitter there. Your 3-month-old kid. That potentially is a Yichud issue. But if you set up, you have somebody, tell your neighbor, do me a favor, come by every so often during lunch. Just walk in. I give you permission, just walk in. That will make it Pesach Pesuach. Your door is open. People have access. They can come in at any time. Sort of like kashrus, a yotzi v'nichnas. So that's a shmira. That's the classic concept that's Pesuach Pesuach. So again, by an average doctor, as long as people can come into the office, even if the door is shut and he's doing an exam, just the patient and the doctor, that would be a din of Pesach Pesuach. You have secretaries, assistant nurses that can come into the office, that would be okay. But there's one perhaps big exception to this. I want to go through this. If you look, there's a wonderful sefer in Hilchos Yichud written by a close chaver of the Steipler Gaon, Avram Horowitz.
It's a big problem.
Fascinating sefer. So he summarizes many halachas of Yichud. In general, these svaras are mamash when you say Yichud Asara. You just illustrate it. You look at the halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch writes on the top of the page, I feel Isha Oskam Malachto, a man whose job spends time with women. It's a woman's doctor. Also, lo this yachid in nashim. It's also for him to have yichud with women. It's yasa. So the Shulchan Aruch says yasa imam ishto. You don't have your wife there. Have someone else there. Okay, woodwork secretary of this. Oh, you have to do Mechaber. Beis Yosef writes a star. Either do this or get another job. No one says you have to become a woman's doctor. Find a different part also.
Yeah.
But the Lashon of the Mechaber is written, Afilu Isha Oskom Lachim. Sounds like this guy who's involved with women, even he has to be worried about the Issur of Yichud. And you don't say Kael, the Chotik over there, the Shulchan Aruch says, the Mechaber used the Lashon of the Rambam. Where the Rambam says, there's a svara, a person could say, he's used to being around women, therefore maybe it doesn't affect him so much. But even him, Chazal say, no, there is an Issur Yichud. But he brings, Avodash Rashi, you can learn this one with Nezeh, even though Rashi gives a terim for one man to be with three women, but Oskavim Nashim Oser. Rashi says, someone who's involved with women makes it worse, the opposite svara of the Rambam. Why? The fisher legal gospel. Legal gospel is a certain connection. In the vernacular back in Brooklyn, we would say, you're Heinisch with them. What? Somebody who is, the Rambam looks at it, okay, it doesn't affect them as much. Rashi says, Pum Farker, as far as Mamash the opposite.
Just the opposite.
Is that you're around women a lot that makes you too close to them. And it'll be easier for you and for them to be involved in something illicit and dangerous. That's a concept of legal gospel. Now what would be a nafkamina? Okay, let's say the guy is a guy who's legal gospel. So if you look in the middle of the page, Bar Halacha, Post Dalet, Yichud and Ishos from legal gospel. So the two examples he brings, you go to Provoso, his relatives, Oshin Nisgado Imo, or they grew up together. He's very close. This man and this woman, they grew up together, very close.
Like brother and sister.
Asur Afil Bezek B'Suach L'Shus Harabim. Southern halacha, there's no heter pesach pasuach. We also can talk about there maybe no heter Bible be'ir. Someone who's legal gospel, they're very close, they have a relationship for years, that makes it worse.
That's
Rashi
worse,
says.
yeah.
And that's a more dangerous situation, and that's the type of situation where you may not have the heter pesach pasuach. You may not have the heter Bible be'ir. Yes.
In society in general, with everything. When I was younger, the whole concept of euthanasia was abhorrent. It was horrifying. People were just shocked at
Euthanasia.
And as society gets degenerated, it becomes more and more common, and becomes common to such an extent now. Nobody even thinks twice about it. Of course, everybody's doing it.
Right?
People are dying to get into it.
So what you do have, this situation of legal gospel, someone there's a relationship with between this man and this woman. It's not just a man walking to a store to buy something, but someone they have a strong previous relationship. that's the type of scenario you lose these heterim. Now, for the record, there is a yesh matirim. There are those that are matir, even by legal gospel, a man and a woman that have some relationship. Pesach B'sulach would be an eitzah. But you see, you're already getting yourselves into tough waters. And when I spoke with Posik about this, and people debate this issue, what would you say about a therapist? Okay, let's say a doctor, okay, we can debate, doctor, you go in, you go out, you know,
It's all business.
even if you're a doctor for years, well, doctor, that's a, you know, legal gospel is a relationship that the way the post can look at it, it really has to be a close relationship, right? The way they said it over in Bnei Brak, Mar Halacha writes it. Rov also is his cousins, his gadol emos, and they grew up with. It has to be a real strong relationship. But when it comes to a therapist, the whole essence of therapy is the therapist has to develop a relationship with the patient, so the patient trusts them with their deepest, darkest secrets. And that builds a kesher. If the patient trusts the therapist, they'll open up to them, they'll talk to them. So, what's a therapist? Is a therapist somebody who's believable gospel? If you say yes, and I was pushing the post, yeah, believable gospel, developing a relationship, something going on there. He wasn't able to push me off so much. Pashtas, there is definitely a strong tzad that would fit that qualification, which would therefore hurt the heter of Pesach B'sulach. Now, stam, as we said before, by a therapist, you're not going to have, like you might have by doctors, where there's someone else in the room when he's performing an examination. By a therapist, it's only one-on-one. Alamai, there's a secretary in the office. You know, most, you know, therapists, I don't know that they have, you know, it takes a while between clients and this. A lot of doctors even have
They don't have a
a
therapist.
secretary.
They don't have a secretary.
Why are they paying for a secretary? They can send
No.
the person for an hour and this.
Too expensive.
To do it himself, right? A doctor, okay, keeps billing this.
Yeah.
But you go to a therapist, there's no one else. Well, let's say there's even someone there. There's a big practice, multiple doctors. They have a secretary there. But if you classify a therapist as someone who's legal gospel, you can no longer simply use that or Pesach B'sulach. Now, B'diavad, we do see that there are people that make with that, okay? But I'm bringing to the attention, this is definitely an issue that has to be grappled with. Yes?
There's an argument to be made that it really doesn't totally apply because the only reason you have the relationship is because it's a therapist.
Okay, that's a decent argument. You're saying that self-go-self is a business relationship. You only have the relationship because you need for business. One of the cases of legal gospel is somebody that does business. The Gemara's case, the way I check the Gemara, Kedusha, is someone who did business with a woman. So the Gemara, people were willing to say that, Bibi, were willing to say that even in the case where the relationship begins with a professional relationship where they're selling something. You spend so much time together, you work together for years, that makes a connection.
There's a difference.
Right?
There's a difference there.
Right? You know, this, I wasn't trying to focus the share on the workplace, but if you go through the issues of legal gospel, you know, at a workplace, and you have a secretary that you use for years, very close, that might also fit into this category. But today we came to talk about therapists. Yes?
First of all, then it would make a difference first visit to a therapist versus
Correct.
second or third or
Correct.
after.
Very good point. You're right. It takes a while to develop this relationship. So Kolzman, you're not at the, now, your idea, Yerachmiel, is counterintuitive. Because, right,
100%.
once you reach the point you feel comfortable opening up with them,
Now you have to
now you have a long
You have to
issue.
go on Zoom.
Right. Yeah, okay.
A separate thing also, doctors, especially specialists nowadays, even if they're not trained as full psychologists, they are increasingly taught to focus on the patient's mental health
Yeah.
and to do some of that same
So you
work
want to
that a
argue that
therapist
even
would
some
do. So
doctors,
even-
could, maybe, it's probably less likely to fit such a category. Now, I want to just quickly go through, yes,
So what about a relationship between somebody and a rabbi? Somebody comes to the rabbi, it's the
excellent point.
same problem.
And it is the same problem. It definitely could be. And as we said before, rabbis are not immune to this. I was talking to one of my friends about it. And he said, yeah, every time I meet with somebody, I always make sure to meet in this spot with a window on the door clearly open. And yeah, the therapy sessions are not limited to therapists. Rabbinic counseling, could be the same. And, especially for a Rav to meet one-on-one with a woman, there has to be major precautions taken. And, it should not be done in the privacy of some spot.
Right. I know even I have friends that are in Kiruv, and they tell me now they don't meet with girls. They only meet with guys.
Yes.
It's a new thing. No more, they don't meet with girls.
It's not such a new thing, it's an old thing. Avram Megaris Nashim, Sar Megayeris Nashim.
Right,
But you're right, I also.
You should have the rabbits and the rabbits.
Fair enough,
Not a new thing that you're
very rough. Let me just show where Moshe's psak by a doctor, and then just to give practical suggestions for these cases. So Moshe again is talking about a man allowing his wife to go to an OBGYN. So where Moshe talks about that, look, if you have, a secretary there in the office, and, that she could come in at any time, okay, so then you have a dinner, pass a besuach, that would be okay. Moshe, here within the Shuvah doesn't mention the Tarbim, the Malachto, and not Makalkel, okay? We talked about that, and that myself might be the evidence. But Moshe talks about having a secretary, have someone come into the office that could come in at any time, even during an exam. That would be okay. Avol Mashmi Yachtes, I'm reading the last 5 lines. Merofe, Av Kishe'eno Mishmeretz. A woman being alone with a doctor when there's no secretary. Vav Achar Azman, you could have cases later at night. Yichud Zman Yichud Lo Ba'atzma. She has a set time, there's no one else coming now. It's the last appointment. Nira She'ein Lahater. Moshe says, there ain't no hatter for that. 100% Asr. So Moshe gives one eitzah, bring with one of her children. The husband is going to have to go with her to the doctor. Moshe is telling you, I'm taking this very seriously. It's 100% Asr to go. But the halacha you should know is she wouldn't be Asr to you that we assume something happened. So halacha is ein Asr al Yichud. Moshe takes it very seriously. You have a situation, a woman's going to a doctor, there's no one else around, where Moshe says, you have no heter. It's Asr. The only, where Moshe gives a heter, okay, bring with a kid. You can't bring with a kid, which would preclude the issues of Yichud, not a baby, but some kid in between ages, which would stop an Issur of Yichud, the husband himself to go. Okay, that's what you have to do. So practically, just to sum up, with the therapist, there's 3 practical suggestions. Number 1, ideally, when you look into these things, one of the considerations, if it's a female going to a therapist, look first for a female therapist. If that's not able, the best person you recommend to go to is a male, okay? And to make sure there's someone coming into the office, which again, is also not so simple, because if it's a small practice, who said he has a secretary? But that you have to think of when choosing a doctor. Is there someone going to be around during therapy sessions. If you can't, and if that's not around, you fall right into this trap where Moshe's issue, as it is, we said, it may not be so simple, Pasuk Besuach, with some legal gospel, but for sure, you need someone to go in, and you have to bring along a child, or possibly even a husband. Now, the husband aspect may not be so simple by therapy, because
Right,
she's
her
talking about
complaints are
him.
against him.
So you really, really have to do your homework on choosing, best to choose the same gender. Not that, then there must be someone coming into the office at all times. Otherwise, as Ramosha said, not so simple to find a heter. Just to summarize, these issues are major issues of abuse in the frum community, and it's something that Chazal put in place tools to stop these things. If people would be vigilant in the halachos of Yichud, that itself, not necessarily a guarantee, but would definitely help things and improve things in society. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Have a wonderful week. I'll take all your questions.
So you kind of just scratched the surface